Hey, what up YouTube? Welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. And I think we need to have a talk. Serious and open, frank conversation about the non-league pyramid. Now, there's been much controversy recently over the pyramid system in England and whether it's fit for purpose, whether it's too big, too small, whether teams such as those who are smaller and can't afford long distance travel should be forced to be relegated on no merit just because they don't want to be reshuffled in leagues, such as happened with Winsford United this season, who couldn't make the journeys down to places in Worcestershire from their Cheshire home, or Northwich, Victoria, which also had a similar complaint, both decided to play on, or even Bishop Stortford, really. We're going to sort of do a bit of a deep dive into all of them. Because I think it is important that these matters are discussed in a non-partisan way. So, firstly, I believe that the pyramid has been flawed for a while now, actually ever since really the pyramid was formed. So, for those which know the history of football, it started mainly as a schoolboys thing and not very competitive. Then in 1888, the Football League was founded. The issue with the Football League was that it was very North and Midlands heavy, as in all of the teams were from either the North or the Midlands. There was no Southern representation. So what was decided was that the teams in the South banded together to form a Southern Football League, which is still in non-league 7th tier today, and we'll come to them later on. But as there was gradual adding of divisions, and they added Division 2 during the 1890s, and then they eventually decided in 1920s that it would be good to add a Division 3. But because all the teams pretty much apart from 3, I think Arsenal, Leyton Orient and Fulham, I think were the 3 which were not already in, who were from beneath the traditional Midlands line. They decided to take all the teams from the Southern Football League and put them in the 3rd division along with relegated Grimsby. Unfortunately for Grimsby, and because they held quite a lot of influence, they complained a lot about having to do some extraordinarily long trips. So the complaints for where they got allocated have been going back since the 1920s, really. So in terms of that, they decided, right, we're going to split the pyramid into Division 3 North and Division 3 South. So all of the Northern League teams pretty much got transferred into the Football League as well. Now, this sort of quick, rapid response by the EFL, or the Football League as it was known then, absolutely decimated non-league for a bit, because they were gradually getting to a point where there was competitive leagues which were, you could almost argue, running at least semi-parallel to the Division 2 of the Football League. They weren't seen as vastly inferior in any way, and because there was no promotional relegation, it was all a system of elections. There wasn't seen to be this huge disparity. However, the issue came with the North-South divide, and I might do this as a separate video looking at the founders of Division 3, where are they now, in a later video at some point. But what happened was that these teams all in Division 3 have gone on to do much greater things. You've got the Brighton Hove Albion was in there, Southampton were in there, Brentford were in there, Plymouth Argyle, any sort of really southern teams you can think of was originally located in this league and have worked their way up quite a bit. So I've not actually got a problem with southern teams being able to go up. But what happened afterwards is what's important, because the Northern Football League was traditionally seen as rivals with the Southern Football League. They were sort of the head-to-head to try and get the elections. But it always would be mainly the Southern League teams which were always seen as more important and better, and always did better when they got elected into the leagues. So there was a sort of superior inferior complex going on, and during this time, the Isthmian League started to gain a bit more importance, so that in the 1970s, the Isthmian League was considered on a par with the Southern Football League. Now, this was obviously a bit of an issue, considering that, okay, now we've got two Southern-based leagues for only one Northern-based league. By this point in 1968, they made the Northern Premier League to sort of seem to trajectory, and originally it was meant to be the Northern Football League and the Northern Premier League were at the same level. That didn't work out entirely. The Northern Football League sort of more became a feeder league for the Northern Premier League. It was ultimately decided that these three leagues then should sort of be equal. However, towards the end of the 1970s, they decided they needed to make elections easier instead of picking from a pool of three different leagues to create one national non-league thing and whoever won that should most likely be selected. This became known as the Alliance Premier League, later the Conference, later the National League. And at some point, I think it was the 1980s, that they decided to allow a promotion and relegation into non-league. And so really that was the start of a pyramid that slowly arranged themselves into a series of promotion relegations between two until we got to the wonderful complex pyramid we have now. But the issue with this was it didn't sort the improper balancing of the North and South. They tried to do that by creating a Conference North and Conference South in the early 2000s. This did have many issues, though, because all it did was carried on pushing down levels which were already equal to each other. So the Northern Premier League and the Southern League this time split into two, with the Central and the South Division, and the Isthmian League were all sort of feeders into these Conference North and Conference South. This is where issues really began to emerge, because although as much talk is discussed about how there's a north-south divide across England, it doesn't quite work out like that if you actually count the Midland sides. And the Midlands have historically been huge in football. You've got the likes of Villa being right up there, as well as down in non-league, some of the biggest heavyweights have come from the Midlands. I mean, Lincoln City were quite successful. Recently, we've seen the rise in Solihull Moors, Gainsborough Trinity, and Matlock Town, sort of like heavyweights, which were traditionally in the Midlands. And this ultimately started the debate. They decided to put most of the Midlands in the north bit, which meant that it was still top heavy towards the south, because you had the south and you had the north and the Midlands. Kidderminster Harriers being, of course, eventually proving sort of this point, and then Gloucester City. And until recently, we've had teams like Banbury United in the National League South, and they still are actually, aren't they? This was a sort of issue because you have the likes of Blythe Spartans, Darlington, Gateshead, South Shields, all these sorts of very far from north teams, not from far away from where I'm living right now, having to travel really long distances to what is definitely the south. Banbury and Gloucester, you can't really consider northern. And these long away trips did cause many financial issues, and a lot of them had to drop into the Northern Premier League during the early days. Northwich Victoria ended up going all the way down to Tier 9, partly because of this issue which they had with the distances travelled. There's been a few other notable cases of teams not being able to travel the full distance because it was just too expensive. I mean, Worcester City as well in the vice order of going across the country and then up north and stuff. It was incredibly difficult for Worcester, even though they're in the Midlands, to keep it sustainable. So they dropped down like a stone. Kings Lynn went out of business and had to reform. You get the picture. It sort of, because these non-league teams have been used for so long, sort of just being able to get by with not that far distances, now having to cover half the country every other week or once a week. That caused huge surge in, and at the same time, you got to remember the Premier League was formed, and that took a lot of money and a lot of investment from what the non-league. A lot of the fans of what would have been going to watch non-league games instead decided to go and watch Premier League games with a better quality of football. So teams lost support in the Northwest area who went to go and, instead of supporting their teams of Bootle or Southport or Tranmere Rovers or something like that, decided to start supporting Everton, Liverpool, and teams in Manchester suffered likewise, going to go and see Manchester United. Teams in London suffered from going to go and see Arsenal instead of one of the other London-based teams in the north of London. But yeah, the issue was clear, and the Premier League have done absolutely nothing in my mind to actually settle this. They haven't given an adequate amount of funds to make up the gap. And so the dwindling now numbers of fans in non-league has forced the whole expenses thing to be ridiculous. Furthermore, the heaviness towards the south is clear. South Central, Southern Premier League, and Isthmian League all have a total this season just gone up 6 teams compared to 2 teams from Northern Premier League. Now, the Southern Central, you could argue some of them are Northern, such as, I don't know, Mickleover or something like that. But ultimately, I think the clues in the name, they are still Southern-ish in nature. Some of them are, I would put them in Northern, but most of them are Southern. Russell Olympic, for example, sort of fits slap bang in the middle of the country and has been put in the north. That sort of should be where the rough thing is, but there are about 5 different teams beneath them, 5, 6, 7 different teams beneath them in geographical location further south. This has created huge problems in terms of distances, and Bishop Stortford's promotion from the Isthmian League this season to the Northern National League North has been absolutely ridiculous. The idea that a team in Hertfordshire, literally a county which borders London, has to travel up to the Northumberland coast in Blyth as an away day, of which a round trip is where it takes you about 5 hours, I think, 5.5 hours, 6 hours to get up to Blyth from there and then back again. The fans aren't going to make that sort of trip, so they can't afford that sort of journey. Now, thankfully, Bishop Stortford have decided they are going to not relegate themselves. But this is where the basis we're starting from. All of the pyramid now is leaning towards the south. You see the same in the Tier 9. You've only really got 3 northern-based teams, the North Counties, East, Northwest Counties, and the Northern League. I mean, I know you could argue the United Counties League and Midlands League, but personally not for me. Whereas you've got so many more in the south half of the country, it is really disproportionate in terms of the teams going up, which is why southern teams are now finding difficulties and why northern teams are also finding difficulties with the upcoming of the southern teams. So I could waffle all day about how the south are advantaged by the pyramid, but ultimately I could carp from the sidelines all day, but it's ultimately needing practical solutions. So I've sort of drawn up loosely. I didn't know I was going to do this video till quite late last night when I saw that Winsford had been relegated. That, you know what, I'm going to do a complete radical rehaul of the conference, North and South, or National League North and South, whatever you prefer, and instead split it into 3 and create a Midlands. Now, this is obviously still an issue because you're basing on what it currently is, and it's still South heavy in terms of the teams. So some of the teams in the North are what I would consider in the Midlands, certainly. But bear with, each team will have 16, so that each of the leagues are split into 3 now, and so 16. That's less games. I know you will only get a total of 30 games a season. But hopefully, that drags more people to watching County Cup games, FA Cup games, FA Trophy games. There's a lot of other competitions, and could potentially see the rebirth of the conference Conference Cup, which was like the EFL Cup, just for teams in the conference and the Conference North and South. I really enjoyed that competition. I understood why it was removed ultimately because of fixture congestion, but the less games in this level should be able to free it up. And just like the EFL Cup, it should be at the later stages of the conference or the National League teams get introduced because they are obviously playing more games, so they could get introduced in the 3rd round, say. So, what are my 3 leagues? Which teams go into them? National League North, I've got Alfreton Town, Blythe Spartans, Boston United, Buxton, Chester, Chorley, Curzon Ashton, Darlington, Farsley Celtic, Kings Lynn Town, Scarborough Athletic, Scunthorpe United, Southport, South Shields, Spennymoor Town, or Warrington Town. So the furthest distance is Kings Lynn to Blythe. Now, that is still quite a trek. Kings Lynn are a real thorn in the side when it comes to sorting this sort of stuff out, because Kings Lynn, although definitely a team in sort of the South or the Midlands, is in a really weird geographic location of being further north than most of the other teams, and don't have that many direct roads getting to it. And I wanted to keep the Kings Lynn Boston derby, which I think is important to try and keep rivalries within the same league as well. The National League Midlands, which I've newly created, will contain Banbury United, Bath City, Bishop Stortford, Brackley Town, Braintree Town, Chelmsford City, Chippenham Town, Gloucester City, Hemel Hempstead Town, Hereford, Peterborough Sports, Rushall Olympic, Slough Town, St Albans City, Tamworth, and Weston-super-Mare. So as you can tell, it does go a bit into the south. You got Weston-super-Mare, which is mainly because last season the 2 Midlands-based clubs which could have definitely fit in here, Kidderminster Harriers and Oxford City, both got promoted. So you're certainly beginning to notice that there are definitely some southern teams creeping into this, and that's partly due to the southern heavy nature of the league structure as it is. I will later on address how I'm planning on fixing that. But yes, onto the National League South as Aveley, Dartford, Dover Athletic, Eastbourne Borough, Farnborough, Ampton and Richmond Borough, Avon Waterlooville, Maidstone United, Taunton Town, Tunbridge Angels, Torquay United, Truro City, Welling United, Weymouth, Worthing, and Yeovil Town. So I think that is fairly balanced. I think it's certainly minimises the travel. So I can already hear people saying, well, how are you going to sort out promotion and relegation? Well, I've got that all covered as well. So all of the champions of the 3 leagues get promoted automatically, as they do at the moment. Then I would get rid of the playoffs, because the playoffs in the National League system is complicated enough as it is, especially at this level when you like, okay, so there's a seeded home team for the final game, and whichever one finished highest gets the home draw. It's all a bit confusing because there's no Wembley glory at the end of it or anything like that. So instead, I propose in creating a mini league. This sort of thing happens. There's a mini league in the South American leagues, particularly. I know they do a mini league to determine whether you get promoted and relegated. It's quite a common thing across the footballing world. This can partly be done because there's less matches throughout the season. So, because there's only 30 matches plus the cup ties, this mini league can be done. So, the mini league is created from the top 2 in each league. These teams will automatically seeded into the semi-finals anyhow of the cup. Of the what do you call it, playoffs. I really don't see the need for the playoffs to be 6 teams big in each of the leagues at the moment anyhow. It's just unnecessary. So there'll be 1 legs each with the person who ever finished highest in terms of points total as well. And whoever wins that mini league gets promoted, which I feel is quite fair. Yes, there will be a few long journeys, but that you're going to have to get used to that if you get promoted to the National League anyhow. The system of relegation. This is a bit more confusing. Each league I've got as relegating 3. So you say we might have lost excitement, but you have to notice that this has got less teams in it, full stop, each league. So the fact is that there is from 4th to the 10th is really that's quite a small chunk of teams which are only going to be really not in one of the positions of moving leagues. So I think it would actually create it a bit more exciting, a bit more fluid. There won't be as such just mid-tableness. So the Northern Premier League will promote 3. The Southern League Central will promote 3. And the Southern League South promotes 3. Notice that the Isthmian League is no longer at this level. That is because I believe the Isthmian League should become a feeder to the Southern League South. There is various reasons for that. I think the Isthmian League at the moment makes it way too southeast heavy of teams getting promoted compared to the rest of the country. And there are already too many teams in the southeast in higher positions that they probably shouldn't be. Therefore, the Northern Premier League will have 3 promoted and 4 relegated. So you get 2 from the NPL East and 2 from an NPL West. 1 via automatic and 1 via 14 playoff, as is already the case. The Southern League Central Division 1 and NPL Mid will have 2 dropping into it and 2 going up, the same as usual. And then the Isthmian League and Southern League Division 1 Southern League South Division 1 will also have the same system. I will make sure that I'm not just relegating the whole league of the Isthmian League just because I happen to be in the southeast. There will be a sort of big table sort of thing where created from the previous season's results, and the makeup of the 3 leagues will remain, and then i.e. the bottom 22 teams will drop into tier 8. So they will be sprinkled throughout, and then you can laterally transfer some more to the Isthmian League from the Southern Combination and the South Counties East League, or some of the better team. Well, no, sorry, from the rest of the Isthmian leagues, because it has currently got 3 leagues getting promoted into it as well, which is part of my issue with it. It shouldn't have 3 leagues promoted into it. Now, the effect on Tier 9, I can already see it is going to have a massive impact on Tier 9. And I was trying to think out in my head this morning, how is this going to quite work? Because obviously you're suppressing leagues further down. Well, firstly, I think the Isthmian League will have representation in Tier 9, a Division 2 East and a Division 2 West. Therefore, I am going to put down the Essex Senior League down to Tier 10. I'm always a bit confused why Essex as a county has more representation than any others at Tier 9, because it sounds like a county league, doesn't it? The Essex Senior League. The United Counties League will have just one Premier Division and then a Division 1 North and a Division 1 South, and the same with a combined Counties League. I also think the Southern Combination and South East Counties League will merge, or maybe even go into the subsequent Division 2 East and Division 2 West, because again, Kent and Sussex, they're sort of individual counties ones at that point. That's sort of the teams which at the moment I'm sort of planning, and then each league will get 24 equal teams, because I noticed the complaint from Winsford and Northwich Victoria was that we are in a league of 24 at the moment, going into a league of 18. And I completely get that. Like, as a person who comes from the Midlands myself, I'd like to see more Midlands representation. And so this sort of like will eventually all balance out to form a sort of better picture. And hopefully it will create the ground requirements a bit easier, because almost every season you see some team or another ending up getting relegated because of ground requirements, and but teams just don't have the resources and infrastructure to make a new stadium all the time. So this sort of squashing of leagues will make sure that some of the teams who end up with a potential, I know a lot of teams in the southeast in tier 11 do not have big stands or even any stands, whereas teams in Yorkshire, in particular, in former mining towns in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire and places like that, tier 11 there are teams which do have stadiums which would be adequate enough for the upper levels. So in terms of just trying to create a bit more equal and remove the top heaviness of the pyramid. Let me know your opinions though down below, because yeah, I think it's quite drastic what I'm proposing. I'm no means suggesting that I've got all of the answers to this problem. I'll be happy to have a debate in comments. Hopefully we can figure out something mutually, but at the current trajectory, we're going to have some very heavy South-based leagues in the future, and the FA really needs to sort it out. But goodbye for now.